I had zero sleep last night. This is gonna be fun.
Bruh.
It's 100% because of the heat. We have another heat wave. You're listening to Freaked Out Podcast. My name is Fabian and I will be your host for today. And you're listening to this special 10th episode. And what makes this episode special? Well, first of all, it's episode number 10. And second, if you're listening this on Spotify or on YouTube, you already know what is the surprise. And the surprise is that this episode has a video version. Yay! The excitement about me having to edit this is real. So first of all, I wanted to give you some sort of a gift because I know that a lot of people actually prefer watching podcasts instead of just listening. There are tons of people who are just listening to podcasts, but there is also another side of people who also want to watch people talk into microphone, including myself. I prefer watching to podcasts, but editing video is hard as fuck. Especially in my case, because you cannot see my mouth with this microphone. So it is really hard, especially in my case, because I am not that fluent in English, first of all. So basically I cut my sentences a lot. So I have a lot of silence to trim out. Anyhow, I also wanted to give you some sort of, a preview of what you may expect on Patreon in the podcast special named Beyond the Podcast, where I will give you one video episode a month as a bonus episode. So I wanted, to give you like a little bit of preview of what you might expect. Anyway, today we have a large story, like a long episode, and it's, well, how to say this without sounding ignorant and stupid and evil, but this is probably the best true crime case story I've ever heard. Like, it's that intense. And this case, if you're from Massachusetts, you probably know this story because it was highly covered in media in the previous couple of months. And yes, you guessed it correctly, but also you saw it in the title. We are talking about the missing and potential murder of Ana Walshe. And this case was also highly covered in Serbian media because Ana was actually born and raised in Serbia, and she left Serbia after she graduated from college, and since then she was living in US, but she is from Serbia. So because this episode will be probably almost an hour long, maybe even more than that, let's just jump straight into it. And if you want to know more details about Patreon stuff, go to patreon.com/freakedoutpodcast. Do not subscribe yet. It's not launched yet. It's not open. There is zero content out there. But you can check the free post I have there about what you will get once the site launches. So my main sources for today are, first of all, the podcast Murder with My Husband, which basically gave me the whole story like on a plate, phenomenally placed details, completed timeline, like sources, and they're just phenomenal. So my episode highly relies on their episode. My other sources are CNN, Boston.com, and the bunch of Serbian media. And if you're not familiar with this case, what happened? Well, basically, on January 4th, 2023, Brian Walsh calls up police and says that his wife is missing for 3 days. And after police starts investigating, they start noticing a lot of inconsistencies in his story. And then they start digging in his history and also in Anna's history. And they find like the ocean of informations, shocking informations. So who was Ana Walshe? Ana Walshe was born as Ana Ljubicic, and she was born in Belgrade, in Serbia, in 1983. She graduated with a degree in French language and literature on the Faculty of Philology in Belgrade. I also went to that college, but I was studying Serbian language and linguistics and literature. After graduation, she moves to the United States and she earns her master's degree in hospitality management from Cornell University. She was very smart, as people described her. She was career-driven, hard-working woman. Her friends, and also, like, every article I read, mentioned how beautiful she was. She was working in upscale Wheatley Hotel in Massachusetts as a reservation manager, where she met her future husband Brian Walshe for the first time in 2008, when she was 25 years old. According to her family, they met in his room while she was cleaning his room when there was cleaning stuff shortage on one occasion, which only shows that how she was, ready to help and to jump in, and she was capable of working in every sphere of the work if she needed to. She was that kind of a professional. Anna herself said that meeting Brian in that hotel was the love on the first sight. Brian Walshe was 7 to 8 years older than her, and he came from a wealthy family. He was born in 1976 as the only child. He went to boarding school in Rhode Island and he later went to private school in Boston. He also attended Carnegie Mellon University. His father, Thomas Walshe, was very known and highly respected neurosurgeon at the time. He was working as a chef of neurology at the Virginia Medical Center in Bedford, Massachusetts. And by 2008, when Brian and Anna met, he was already the head of the Women's Hospital Division in General Neurology, where he'll work all the way up to 2018. He also owned a beachfront home in Massachusetts. So he is smart and he has money. Brian and his mother are very close, and as a couple of articles said, she quote-unquote depended on him, whatever that meant. Does he give her money or attention? In which way she depends on him? Soon after their meeting in 2008, Anne and Brian started dating, and for a couple of months they were maintaining the long-distance relationship, which I applaud to everyone who can, survive in those conditions. I once tried and never again. Anna then moves to Washington, D.C., where she worked at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel for a short period of time. Then she moves to Boston to be with Brian, where they lived together for a couple of years until they got married in 2015. Their wedding was fairy tale-like, as everyone described it. Anna was beaming in giant white dress. Couple dozen guests attended the wedding, and what got my attention is that none of the guests were from Brian's side of the family. They were all Anna's cousins from Serbia. Weird, right? But again, he was not in a great relationship with his family, but we'll talk about that later. But however, it was weird. Soon after they got married, they started a family, and they had 3 sons in the next couple of years. Anna buys a house on Edgewood Road in Massachusetts in 2018, and she pays $510,000 for it. Brian is, however, not listed as a co-owner of that house, but he is listed on a declaration of homestead, which means that it's going to be probably a family home. Then that same month, Brian sets up a wine brokerage business, and he lists the Edgewood property as the business address. So he wanted to sell wine from that house. On Valentine's Day 2019, Brian gives Anna a Maserati from 2015, which was worth over $100,000. Anna says over her Instagram how that gift was the best gift she ever received. How could it not be the greatest gift you ever received? Like, it's $100,000 worth Maserati. Anna also says that Brian always knows how to make her childhood dreams come true. I'm so jealous. In November 2020, Anna sells this house for $840,000, which is $330,000 in profit. She bought it for $510,000. Then she switches from a career in hospitality to a career in real estate, and she begins working as the director of operations in one well-known real estate company in Massachusetts. Around 2020, Anna now apparently owns 4 properties. Since she started working in real estate, she started working as the real estate agent, and then she starts buying properties in DC, Massachusetts, and Maryland, and they are all in her name. Brian is not listed on any of them, which is, again, quite suspicious. But again, everyone has different relationships with their partners, with finances, with joint accounts and single accounts, and, all of that. In early months of 2022, Anna sells the family home in Massachusetts for $1.3 million, which had been in her name only. And then they start, as a family, renting a home with a pool in Cohasset in Massachusetts, which is a quote-unquote rich and wealthy suburb of Boston. This house is also less than a mile from the beach. In late February of 2022, Anna leaves her job and she takes a new job for an intercontinental real estate firm called Tishman Speyer, where she begins working as the real estate investment manager in Washington, D.C. So, with a family of 5 living in Cohasset in Massachusetts, Anna now commutes to D.C. every week for her job, and then she returns to Massachusetts on the weekends. And while she's working like that, Brian is staying home to take care of their 3 children. So he's a home dad. Is that the term? So, we come to the 4 most important days in this family's life. The 4 days in which Anna disappears from the face of earth. She's nowhere to be found. And the whole masquerade starts playing right in front of our eyes, in real time. Complete chaos. At this time, January of 2023, Anna is 39 years old and Brian is 47. Brian's father has now passed away, but his mom is living only about an hour away from their home. Anna, besides her doing her job in DC and traveling every week, she volunteers for an organization helping immigrants called Sky International Center. So she is confirming that she is one fucking hardworking woman who wants to work, to make her life and other lives better. And on the outside, everything seems perfect. Well, just say perfect. And as Murdering My Husband mentioned, the Walsh family was living the real American dream in today's world. Then we jump to December 31st, 2022. Anna and Brian have a very small New Year's Eve gathering at their home. Anna was home for the New Year's Eve, and then she planned to stay on home for January 1st and January 2nd, and then on January 3rd she had to fly back to DC for her work on January 4th. They also have their friend Jim over for that night. And Jim is Anna's former boss at the real estate company she worked before moving to DC. And their 3 sons were also present in the house that night. They had a nice dinner, and Jim said that Anna has been sitting on a bar stool in the kitchen texting her friends the whole time. Jim leaves the house at about 1:30 a.m. and everything seems fine to him, like nothing's wrong. They stepped into New Year, they had a nice meal, and then he went home. So he basically, besides Brian and children, was practically the last person to see Anna alive, or anywhere. The first sign that not everything is fine comes 3 days later on January 4th, 2023, when Anna does not show up for her work in DC. As this was extremely unusual for her to not come to work and not leave any notice or call in to say that she's not coming to work, her employee reports to the Massachusetts police, and he tells the police that Anna did not show up for work as expected that day. Well, now some of you, and some of us too, me, think that that's maybe a little bit too much, Maybe she had some kind of a emergency and she could not call, and you jump to report her missing. But again, in this case, it's amazing that he jumped on and called the police and reported her missing because, well, you'll see what happened. He also said that he called her husband, who assured him that Anna 100% flew to DC, and not on January 3rd as she planned, but on January 1st, because she had the work emergency, in his words. Right after this guy called the police, Brian Walsh also reports his missing wife. The police goes to their home on January 4th. Brian speaks to the police multiple times. He tells the police that he and Anna went to bed right after their friend Jim left. Then around 6 a.m. on New Year's Day, Anna tells him that she has an unexpected work emergency and that she needs to fly back to DC. She kisses Brian goodbye and she tells him to go back to sleep. According to Brian, she leaves her house sometime between 6 and 7 a.m. And he says that that was the last time he saw her or heard of her. Brian later tells the police that she normally takes an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi to the airport. Later that day, a babysitter came to that house that afternoon, January 1st, and she confirmed that Anna was not in the house and nothing was strange. Brian says that he left around 3 p.m. to go grocery shopping on January 1st. You have grocery shopping. Then he says after finished that shopping, he went to see his mom around 4 p.m. And if we remember, she lives an hour away from their home. But the trip that they took him longer than that. He says that he got lost on his way to his mother's house. And this is because he didn't have his cell phone with him that day, because apparently their oldest son hid it somewhere in the house so he could not use GPS. But your mom lives 1 hour away and you went multiple hundred of times to her home. How hard it could be. About 15 minutes after he got to his mother's house, he says he started running errands for her. He went to Whole Foods and to CVS. According to Brian, he called Anna's company to see if she had shown up for work. Brian then says he was out that whole day. He didn't have his phone with him. He was running errands for his mother, and that is his alibi, essentially.
Okay.
Initially, police believed that Brian has been cooperative because he was like, yes, I will tell you where I was. I want to find my missing wife. She left then and then. She took Uber to airport, blah, blah, blah. However, police begin to notice something odd about Brian's car that day, January 4th, the first day of questioning. His seats were down, and there's a plastic liner inside the back of the car. And then on January 5th, tomorrow, police go out to their house again, and then they notice how the plastic liner is missing. The police asked him about that plastic liner, and he says he threw out the plastic liner. Then the police notice vacuum marks on the carpeting inside his car since he thoroughly cleaned his car that morning. Amazing. Meanwhile, the police of course follow up on Brian's story to see if it checks out, so they can try to figure out, what happened to his wife at this point. And they quickly discover some inconsistencies with Brian's account of what happened that day. They learned that Anna's cell phone sent the signal, or pinged, in the area of their home in Cohasset on January 1st and on January 2nd. So his story about Anna leaving for DC on January 1st basically falls apart because, there is no way she would forget her phone. Especially if you're organized and busy as she was, like you could not live without your phone. And you mean to tell me that she went and flew to DC to her work without her phone? Sure. Also, no activity had happened on Anna's cards since December 31st. Brian has said that he has lost or misplaced his cell phone on January 1st. He said that his child may have hid it somewhere in the house. However, investigators determined that it was plugged in that day and it was in the house because it was pinging. The police also find out that one of the family's cell phones have left the house that day. So it was not Brian's or Anna's phone, it was their oldest child, 6-year-old's cell phone, and that's because Brian took that phone with him while he went out to his mom and do shopping, and he was carrying his son's phone. Because he allegedly could not find his phone that was plugged in the house, and because apparently his son hid it somewhere. But again, he also said that he did not have his phone with him, so he could not use GPS. Lies. He lied to everything. Case closed. So, the police took data from his son's phone next, and they found that these 2 stores he said he visited were not the 2 stores he visited. Specifically, police learned that at 5:30 p.m. on January 1st, when he, in his words, went to CVS and Whole Foods to buy groceries for his mom, Brian actually went to a liquor store dumpster, and surveillance tape catches him throwing away trash bags in that, random dumpster. Then a little later on January 1st, police find that the oldest child's cell phone was pinging at another dumpster at Brian's mother's house. The phone then pinged at Lowe's hardware store, and as Murder with My Husband said, quote, "And if there's something I know, it's that if a person is going to a hardware store hours after the person they last seen with is missing, it's probably not for a light bulb." Yes. Agreed. Brian is also captured on videotape at this store. So the police learned that he bought the following items, and this was according to CNN. He bought 5 5-gallon buckets, a hacksaw, cloth towels, a full coverage suit, 200 disposable rags, trash bags, and other cleaning products. We are on a great trail. The phone then travels to a CVS, where Brian was also seen on a video purchasing 13 different types of hydrogen peroxide. And for your information, if you don't know this, hydrogen peroxide eliminates blood. When it comes in contact with blood, blood just disappears. Police determined that on January 2nd, 2023, Anna's cell phone is still pinging at the family home, and it does pinging until about 3 a.m. This is contrary to Brian's initial story. He says she's gone by this time. Prosecutors say it had been stationary in the area of her home in Cohasset since New Year's Eve, so it did not leave the house in this time. The babysitter comes over again on January 2nd, and she is watching on 2 of the children while Brian takes the 3rd one out for ice cream. And all investigators agree that this is probably the only truth Brian Walshe has said in the whole case, because he's seen on a videotape at the juice bar with his child. So this is the only truth he said in the whole case. On January 2nd, Brian also buys 3 rugs at a local home goods store. Then later in the day on January 2nd, Brian goes to a Home Depot in Rockland, Massachusetts. He pays $450 in cash for a number of items, including hatchet goggles, tarps, another bucket, mops, and 12 pounds of baking soda. And for your information, baking soda also dries blood. And something that I noticed during his visits to these stores, he is always wearing a gloves and a face mask while buying these items. So, upon checking on United States flights, Anna does have a flight booked from Boston to DC on January 3rd, 2023. But police learned that she never got on that flight. Police learned that on January 3rd, around 4:30 p.m., Brian goes to an apartment complex in Abington. Why? Well, surveillance tape catches Brian carrying a heavy garbage bag from his car. The garbage bag appears to be heavy based on Brian's movements on the tape. It appears that he's struggling a little bit to lift it. and Abington is a town about 4 miles west of where they live. At 4:50 p.m. on January 3rd, Brian goes to another apartment complex in Abington, and then later around 5:10 p.m., Brian goes to yet another apartment complex. He's throwing more things out in dumpsters along the way, and all of which got caught on cameras. So, to sum up things till now, from January 1st to January 3rd, Brian is basically, just stopping at different places, throwing heavy trash bags in different dumpsters. And then he goes and buys things for dismembering his wife. There, I said it. It's obvious. It's quite obvious. And the only time he has an alibi is when he takes his child out for ice cream. Police obviously immediately go and try to find these items that they can see Brian throwing away in dumpsters. However, at the time that he was going around to all these dumpsters on January 3rd, Ana hadn't even been reported missing. And these items that Brian was throwing out in various dumpsters were incinerated by the garbage workers before police could be even aware of them. And then he proceeds to also deep clean his car, destroying basically every bit of physical evidence. At 8 a.m. on January 4th, Brian Walshe leaves kids at daycare. Then he goes to Swampscott, which is where his mother lives, and he goes to yet another dumpster. And this is according to cell phone records, which established that Brian was, quote-unquote, circling his mother's apartment complex before he stops at the corner where the dumpster is located. And as reported on CNN and many other news outlets, police will be successful in recovering the following items that Brian dumped in this specific dumpster. So these things were not gone yet. And they found 10 trash bags that originated from dumpster contained blood stains cleaning materials, a hacksaw, a hatchet, a purse and boots worn by Ana Walshe. And they also found her COVID-19 vaccination card. And those were Prada boots, if I'm not wrong, I heard it somewhere, and Hermès purse. So things that she would probably never throw away. And also her vaccination card. So it's quite, obvious that she is, dead. So at this point, as I said, it's pretty obvious that he killed her, dismembered her, and then threw her body in dumpsters all around the country. Even though they found all of this evidence, they did not find any part of her body, and that's why she is still to this day registered as the missing person, and she has not been declared dead yet. Even though everybody believes that she is no longer with us, without the body they cannot officially pronounce her dead. Same thing happened with, if you remember, with Susan Cox Powell from the episode 5. She's still, to this day, she's still missing. She never returned, but they cannot, pronounce her dead because they don't have a body. The organized search for Ana begins on January 6, 2023. And January 6th is Christmas Eve in Serbia, and generally in Orthodox Christianity. So, police searched the woods near their home in Cohasset using a canyon unit, police search and rescue unit. The search also expanded into other towns. Investigators also searched Ana's home in DC, and they find something very interesting there. They found out that the apartment was ready for the kids to move in there, with clothes and everything. And the police wonder if Ana had been planning to leave Brian and take kids with her to Washington, D.C. At this point, police announces that there was absolutely no reason or indication that Ana would voluntarily vanish and just stop communicating with everyone. On January 2nd, Detective Harrison Schmidt from Cohasset Police Department receives an email from a Gmail account identifying itself as someone who kidnapped Ana Walshe. It's a ransom note. The email demands $127,000 and claims that, quote, "We have her here with us. We have the so-named Ana Walshe with us here. We had a deal worth $127,000, and she messed up. And as she messed up, we have her here with us, and if she doesn't pay the money, then she'll never be back. and we know that the police and the FBI are involved. Good luck finding us." End quote. Obviously, the police are suspicious of this email. They think that it's a hoax, since the ransom note did not give the deadline and no details for making the payment. And let me guess, it was Brian who sent the email, right? In the meantime, at least 60 investigators are busy watching surveillance tapes at the stores Brian claims he went to while he was helping his mother on January 1st. And on January 2nd, the police announces that the search for Ana Walshe is over. Police interview another man who they learned is closely associated with Walshe family, or at least with Ana Walshe. They have discovered that Ana has been having an affair with a man in Washington, D.C. for the past several months. And they also interviewed that man, and they have learned that things were not quite as perfect in the Walshe family as they might have appeared from the outside, or on Instagram while she was, receiving the Maserati worth $100,000. They supposed that Brian knew about the affair and that he killed Ana because of that. Plus, she probably planned leaving him and moving to DC with their kids. They also found out that there is a specific reason why Ana and Brian were celebrating New Year's Eve at home. Aside from the fact that they have 3 small children, but the reason is that Brian Walshe has to be home. He has to be home because he's serving time on home arrest due to some federal fraud charges. A friend of Brian's father that says he knows Brian since he was a child claims that Brian became fixated on a materialistic and extravagant lifestyle. And as Brian got older, he sort of lost touch with how people make it in the real world. There were signs from the beginning that he was a con artist. He dropped out of Carnegie Mellon University and checked into a mental health facility at the Austin Riggs Center, where he spent a significant amount of time in his early years. Also, there is a reason that Brian's family did not attend the wedding. Brian becomes estranged from his father in 2009 after being accused of stealing $1 million. And as much as I understood, they sold one property and he should split that money with his father, but he decided to just take $1 million and run away. And his father was permanently affected by this, and they did not talk to each other for almost a decade. Then in 2016, Brian sold 2 fake Andy Warhol paintings on eBay to a gallery owner, a man named Ron Rivlin, who believed that those paintings were authentic paintings. He says that at first Brian was charismatic, articulate, transparent, and professional. This gallery owner says that he had been buying art for years and that this was the first and only time he has ever been frauded. And the total for these paintings was $225,000. While all of this is going on, Brian's father signs his will. He makes a will and signs his will in May of 2016. And once again, he's very wealthy, he owns a beachfront home, and he was a director of hospital, neurosurgeon. And he apparently keeps his will in that home. 2 years later, Brian is arrested in connection with the charges of the art fraud. And after his arrest, Brian transfers $95,000 to Ana, $400 in cash and $91,000 on a check, just a week or 2 after his arrest. Then, Brian's mother gives him $125,000 for his expenses. He doesn't disclose these funds or the transfers he made to Ana to the federal court, where he is appearing on the fraud charges. Police also found out that around this time, Ana reported him for threatening her with murder. However, she later dropped the charges. Then just a few short months later, Brian Walshe's father, Dr. Thomas Walshe, dies on September 21st at the age of 71 while he was on a trip in India. Dr. Walshe's attorney informs Brian that his father has passed away. However, Brian does not inform the rest of the family of his father's death. Instead, he makes a plan to go to his father's house and find the will his father signed and left at the house. Brian asks his father's friend for a key to his father's beachside home, which is full of valuable assets such as paintings, rugs, jewelry, antiques. And Brian claims that he needs the key to get into the house to get documents that will help get his father's body back to the United States. So the friend leaves the key under the doormat for him. And while he was inside the home, that friend notices the will, which is apparently sitting on the top of the table. Because how could he see the will? Anyway, he sees the will and he takes photos of the will, which is a smart move, since Brian raided his father's home, stealing thousands of dollars worth of artwork and luxury items, as well as his father's car. He then tries to sell his father's house for $140,000 more than it was worth. Brian goes online and tries to sell the valuables that he's stolen. And according to court documents, Brian also withdraws over $100,000 from his deceased father's bank account. According to Fox News, Brian drains his deceased father's bank accounts and he sells off his valuables. Brian also finds and destroys his father's will, in which his father disinherited him. Brian will proceed to lie and then tell the probate court that his father died without the will. Then his father's friend comes forward and he says, "Look, I took a picture. I took a picture of his will. Here it is." Brian then claims that his father's signature on the will was forged, but, all other family members come forward saying, no, these guys were estranged. There is no way that his father did not have a will, and that there is no chance that he left everything to his son. Also, according to the New York Post, that father's friend of more than 35 years stated in 2019 that he had known Brian since he was 13 years old. And he said Brian's father told him that his son had been a long-term patient at the Austin Riggs Psychiatric Center and that he had been diagnosed as a sociopath. In November 2018, Brian pleads not guilty to multiple federal fraud charges. He is later accused of misleading the court by failing to disclose certain assets he had. Ana is also accused of benefiting from Brian's fraud and from his failures to disclose assets. And remember how he bought her a 2015 Maserati? Well, that was only 3 months after he pled not guilty to federal fraud charges. Well, at least we know where the money went. He got charged and he got sentenced to home prison. So as part of the agreement, he was allowed to request to leave home as long as he provides details about where, when and why. And he was not forced to wear an ankle monitor, but he still was technically on a house arrest. And he was also allowed to take the kids to school and from school. As for Ana, the police have learned a bit more about her background as well. Around 2005, shortly after she came to United States, Ana met a man named Mark, apparently at the hotel where they both worked, and they got married only because she then allegedly became liable to get her green card. Then she met Brian in 2008, and they dated for years, and then they got married in 2015, right after Ana divorced Mark in 2014. So she was basically, all that time that they were dating, she was married to this guy. Ana spent Thanksgiving 2022, she's been having an affair with in Washington DC for the past few months, and they spent Thanksgiving together in Dublin, in Ireland. According to prosecutors, Brian begins suspecting that his wife is having an affair at this point. He starts stalking several male friends of Ana, and especially one man over Instagram. I'm not sure if this was the man, but he was targeting one man, especially. According to Brian's defense attorney, he did not suspect anything and he did not know anything about his wife's affair until he read about it later in the prosecution papers. But on December 26, 2022, Brian's mother hires a private investigator to follow Ana in DC So there is no fucking way that he didn't at least suspect something. Like, you mean to tell me, no, I did not know anything. I did not suspect my wife having an affair. And then his mother is like, let me hire a private detective and follow my daughter-in-law. Shut the fuck up. On December 27th, 2022, Brian Googles, what's the best state to divorce for a man? And this search is done on their oldest child's iPad, the 6-year-old, supposedly in attempt to hide the trace. On December 28th, 2022, Ana has dinner in DC with a friend and she breaks down in tears. She tells her friend that she is very upset about her husband and that she's worried that he's gonna be sent to prison because of all these fraud charges, and that she's thinking about leaving him and moving with their 3 kids to DC. The friend reports that Ana is uncharacteristically emotional and extremely upset. According to Boston.com, a friend of Ana's later tells the media that the marriage was strained, and at this point, Ana had given Brian some sort of ultimatum about the resolution of his criminal case, and that she wanted the kids to move to be with her in DC. Ana is also reportedly photographed not wearing her wedding ring near the end of 2022. On Friday, December 30th, Ana flies from DC to Massachusetts for the New Year's holiday. And on that Saturday, December 31st, Ana and Brian have that small New Year's Eve gathering at their home. Brian is still on home arrest. The 3 kids are at home, and Ana unsuccessfully tries calling her family members in Serbia after midnight that night, supposedly to wish them a Happy New Year. Prosecutors believe that Brian then beats Ana to death in their home in the early hours of New Year's Day. Police obtained search warrant for their house on January 8th, and they found blood and bloody broken knife down in the family basement. As part of the search in their home, authorities take and search the electronics, including the child's iPad. And now comes the best part in this case. The searches. There is more searches done on the oldest child's iPad between 5:50 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. on January 1st. And I will bring you the whole list of terms Brian searched between January 1st and January 4th on his oldest child's iPad, probably in order to conceal his searches. Here are the searches. Hold tight. 5:55 a.m. How long before a body starts to smell? 4:58 a.m. How to stop a body from decomposing. 5:47 a.m. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. 6:25 a.m. How long for someone to be missing to inherit? 6:34 a.m. Can you throw away body parts? 9:29 a.m. What does formaldehyde do? It cleans blood. 9:34 a.m. How long does DNA last? 9:59 a.m. Can identification be made on partial remains? 11:34 a.m. Dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. 11:44 a.m. How to clean blood from wooden floor. 11:56 a.m. Luminol to detect blood. 1:08 p.m. What happens when you put body parts in ammonia? 1:21 p.m. Is it better to put crime scene clothes away or wash them? And I'm just wondering what comes up when you search this on Google. I'm not gonna try. But what the fuck does come out when you search, how to dispose of a body if you really need to? Or can you throw away body parts? Like, what the fuck? On January 2nd, Brian Walshe travels to a Home Depot and he pays $450 in cash for supplies, including mops, bucket, goggles, tarps, a hatchet, and a baking soda. And then later he proceeds to Google at 12:45 p.m. Hacksaw, best tool to dismember. 1:10 p.m. Can you be charged with murder without a body? 1:14 p.m. Can you identify a body? And this one upsets me so much. At 1:14 p.m. he Googles, can you identify a body with broken teeth? On January 3rd at 1:02 p.m. what happens to hair on a dead body? 1:30 p.m. What is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on a surface in the woods? 1:20 p.m. Can baking soda mask or make a body smell good? There are also searches for how to remove blood from concrete, how to detect blood with fluorescent light, how police would find it. And he also does a search for a company that cleans up crime scenes. Those people who, after the investigation is done, go and clean up the blood and the apartment and whole crime scene. And what was he trying to do? Hire them to hide a body and clean the crime scene without the police. On January 4th, he repeated searches: 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to, dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body, can you be charged with murder without a body, and then again, my favorite, can you identify a body with broken teeth? Jesus Christ. On January 8th, police confronts Brian with all of the Google searches they found on the iPad. He was shocked. I think that he did not believe that it was possible to find them. However, then he explains that it was his son's iPad that had made those searches on its own, and then he accuses his own son that he made those searches. And the interview was ended by his attorney when officers asked how a 6-year-old could make these searches without any spelling mistakes. On January 8th, authorities believe that they have enough evidence for an arrest. And also, I forgot to mention earlier that on January 7th, a small fire started in the attic of their Cohasset home. I guess it was nothing important for the case itself, since rarely who mentioned it, but again, what if he was burning up the evidence in the attic? I would not be surprised at all. Brian is arrested and charged with the crime of misleading a police investigation. He's not yet charged with the murder, as the investigation is still early on. There's no body, so he's in custody where he remains to this day. They need to have a body for him to be pronounced guilty. However, in this case, there is too much circumstantial, not even circumstantial, hardcore evidence, like those Google searches and those bloody sheets they found, broken knife, and multiple, camera recordings about him buying a hatchet and then throwing away that hatchet, bloody hatchet, and her purse and boots, and however, the trial has not started yet, and they are still building the case against him. And by US law system, every person is considered innocent until proven guilty. So he is basically still innocent. Where's the logic? I don't know where's the logic, but fine. Their 3 sons have been placed in the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. It's unclear where they are today. But according to CNN, a flood of families have offered to take the children and keep them. Even her family members in Serbia offered to bring them here and raise them here. The Murder with My Husband also said, Brian obviously had a long history of being a con man, but did he also have a history of violence? Those are 2 very different things. According to one witness, yes. This man says he went on a trip to China with Brian and that Brian was trying to illegally smuggle antiques out of the country. When he was confronted, he picked up a knife and he literally attempted to kill 4 or 5 guards that had come to talk to him about the crime. And I guess that more of this will be brought up since the actual trial begins, and many more informations, and I'm very, very happy and ready to cover that and make a second part of this story. A charge of first-degree murder in Massachusetts carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The prosecution's theory of this case is that Brian beat his wife to death after discovering her affair, then dismembered her body in the family's basement and threw her body parts away in multiple dumpsters across the country. He was also going to inherit $2.7 million in life insurance for her death. And Anna's body to this day had not been found. And that is the end of this tragical, but again, such a hard to believe story. Like, did he think like nobody's gonna find him? Like, he was wearing gloves and face masks while he was buying, but again, you can tell that's him. And then those searches. Like, at least clean your Google search history, for God's sake. What the fuck? How to dispose a body if you really need to? Like, what the fuck? And it is really, really sad what happened, not only to Anna, but to their children. Like, and it's something that my mom said while this case was as I said, it was highly mentioned and covered in Serbian media. One thing that my mother kept repeating, like, she was shocked. Like, how can someone purposely leave the children without their mother, and now they are left without their father too? Like, that's something that we normal people cannot process in our heads. And that was that. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, thank you. My mouth hurts. It's so hot in here in front of these lights. Oh my God. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to listen to other episodes, we are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Google Podcasts, literally everywhere. Check out our Patreon page to see the details for Freaked Out Beyond the podcast. And that's that. I'll see you next time. Bye.